I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos. Boom.
Hello there, Price of Reason here with a movie review. This week I saw an early screening of Creed 3, a movie that features the directorial debut of Michael B. Jordan, who also plays Adonis Creed. It's also the first movie within the Rocky franchise to not feature Sylvester Stallone as Rocky. Apparently, Stallone has had a falling out with producer Irwin Winkler over rights to the franchise, which Winkler technically owns. While Stallone is still credited as a producer and creator, I don't believe he was actually involved in the movie in any way. As both a fan of the Rocky character and Stallone himself, his falling out and absence is obviously disappointing, but I don't dislike Michael B. Jordan, and he is certainly not to blame for business disputes behind the scenes, so I decided to give this movie a fair chance. Walking into the screening, I was curious if Michael B. Jordan was strong enough to carry the franchise on his own, and also if he could actually direct a good movie. Since the trailer itself reveals a lot about the movie's plot anyways, I will quickly go over the general story without any real spoilers. Creed 3 takes place some years after Adonis Creed has firmly cemented himself as a boxing champion. After announcing retirement and shifting his focus to being a businessman, husband, and father, Damian, an old friend of his from his troubled childhood, shows up. Feeling guilt over events that happened in their childhood when they were like brothers, Donnie wants to help Damian, but those good intentions end up backfiring. Eventually, it turns out that Damian wants to become a boxing champion himself and is willing to go through great lengths to do so. This causes a personal conflict between Damian and Donnie, and since this is a boxing movie, well, I think it's pretty clear where that conflict ultimately leads to. As usual, I will talk about what I liked about this movie, and then what I didn't like, followed by a final verdict. Let's start with the good. Number 1, the directing. It seems like Michael B. Jordan took his directing job pretty seriously, as I never felt the movie looked cheap or amateurish. It seems like he actually gave some thought to how he wanted this movie to look, feel, and flow, and I think he did a decent job. Now don't get me wrong, he's no Tarantino or anything, but I think the movie is competently directed overall. Number 2, Jonathan Majors. While I think that Jonathan Majors is really being overhyped these days by the media, in his role as Damian, he shows that he's at least a pretty good actor. During the movie, he was able to give the character a bit of depth. On the surface, he was trying to appear as a nice guy, but there's always this feeling that he's not as nice as he seems. Major's layered and nuanced performance here in Creed 3 is a huge contrast to what we've recently seen in Ant-Man and the Wasp, where he, like most of the other actors in that movie, seemed mostly confused about their roles. I also appreciate that Major's got in shape for Creed 3, and his fight scenes are also pretty well executed. Still, while I generally like Major's performance in Creed 3, I think it would really help his career if the media stopped talking about him so much. I do think he's a pretty good actor, but I don't think that he's the best actor. Perhaps over time Majors will prove me wrong, but if he really is the best, let his work speak for itself rather than the shill media. Number 3, the fight scenes. I think there are some pretty cool fight scenes in this movie. Not sure if they're a franchise best, but they have a pretty good flow to them. From what I understand, Michael B. Jordan was influenced by anime when it came to some of the visuals for the movie's fights. In some cases, I think that influence is positive, but there were a few instances that it seemed a bit overindulgent. Overall, though, I didn't dislike the fights, and I think that they were pretty well set up. Well, that was the good. Now let's talk about the bad. Number 1, flawed screenplay. While I wouldn't say that Creed 3 has a poor screenplay, it does have a few glaring issues. Without spoiling, I'll explain what I mean. There is one moment in the movie where there's somewhat of a twist. Not only is the twist rather predictable, there's a character that has early knowledge of the twist, but illogically and unexplainably doesn't say anything about it. Something about the way that twist unfolds doesn't really work for me, and could have easily been written in a more impactful way, with just a few changes. At another point in the movie, and this pretty much appears in the trailer, amidst the tension with Damian, Adonis decides to man up and do what he do. The problem is his motivations for stepping up don't feel strong enough. In many ways, I feel like the screenplay for this movie tried to mirror a lot of concepts and ideas from the movie Rocky 3, but in Rocky 3, you knew exactly why Rocky needed to fight Clubber Lang. That movie set up a logical, emotional journey for the main character Rocky, and you understood at every point why he was doing what he was doing. In this movie, I wasn't fully convinced why Adonis needed to fight, and again, this could have been fixed very easily. The weird thing is the screenplay isn't terrible, but the two most important and impactful story developments in the movie are heavily flawed. Ultimately, and unfortunately, this does hurt the overall storytelling too. And it's a shame because I really feel that this could have been avoided, maybe with just another draft of the script, maybe with just some polishing. Number 2, mishandled idea. Throughout the movie, as we learned in Creed 2, Adonis' daughter is deaf, and her parents and her grandmother talk to her using sign language. I think this is overall a good idea to explore, as it adds a layer to Adonis' role as a father. I also think that the young actress that played her, who is deaf in real life, did well in the role. My issue isn't with that part of the story, but rather how it was presented on screen. I think that when the other characters are signing to communicate with the daughter, it would have been easier for the audience to follow if they spoke their dialogue while signing. Instead, there are a number of lengthy scenes where multiple actors are on screen using sign language, and the viewers have to read entire conversations through subtitles. It seems like a minor issue, but overall I felt that extended moments of silence with subtitles slowed down the movie a bit. Now, just to clarify, subtitles would have been just fine for the daughter, as this is how she communicates. I'm only referring to the other characters, of course. It doesn't ruin the movie or anything, but I think the idea could have been handled differently. Number 3, no Rocky. There are some good performances in this movie. Michael B. Jordan may not be right for every role, but I think he's pretty good as Adonis Creed, and he does what he needs to do. Tessa Thompson isn't right for every role either, but I think this is probably her best role to date, and I don't dislike her in it either. Phylicia Rashad, in my opinion, may be the best actress in this entire cast, and she adds some emotional depth to the movie in a few moments where it's really needed. Wood Harris is solid as Duke Jr. too, but with all of these compliments, there's one ingredient that's truly missing here, and that is, of course, Sylvester Stallone as Rocky. In the first 2 Creed movies, Stallone really proved to be a type of glue that holds these movies and this entire franchise together. His on-screen presence is significant, and while you could argue that not every acting role is suitable for Stallone, he is absolutely fantastic as Rocky. In the absence of such an iconic character, not only for this franchise but in all of cinema history, there really isn't anybody here to fill that void. Even if Stallone as Rocky would have appeared in the final third of this movie, it would have greatly improved it, writing flaws and all. Regardless of his current dispute over the rights to the franchise, I know that Stallone wasn't going to be playing Rocky forever, but when I look at this franchise, I really can't see how it truly grows without him. Stallone is the beating heart of this franchise, and any movie without him on screen already makes it feel less official. He just has this larger-than-life personality and charm, and not having him here just doesn't feel right. And that is ultimately the biggest problem with Creed 3. It's a somewhat competently made, yet serviceable enough boxing movie. However, it's not a great Rocky franchise movie. In interviews, Michael B. Jordan said that the movie needed to be its own thing, and I respect that. The problem is that its own thing isn't necessarily better than anything that came before it, including its 2 direct predecessors. Overall, I didn't dislike this movie, but at the same time, it probably won't be one that I'm going to rewatch again either. As far as popcorn movies go, there's certainly something to enjoy in Creed 3, but if you're a longtime fan of the Rocky franchise, it will likely leave you at least somewhat disappointed. What did you think of Creed 3? Can the Rocky franchise survive without Rocky? Feel free to let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel and also clicking on that wonderful notification bell. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.